Welcome, everyone. So great to see you all here. Hopefully you can hear and see me. So it's brilliant to see so many early birds that have jumped in today. Hope you enjoyed those tunes. Hope you could hear that music playing in the background there. For those who are interested, Benny sings and Wolfpack, for those who like their funk. Great to have so many of you sign up to join us today. We really appreciate your time. No, it's a busy season, and I'm just really excited to be presenting to you today and talking about the topic of end of financial year and advisory with our good friends at ADA. I've sort of subtitled this session, Creating Capacity in Your Practice. We're hearing some really interesting things from across the accounting industry, accounting and bookkeeping industries at the moment, just around A, not being able to find staff, B, being full to the brim with work, and sort of staring down the barrel of a gun with all of the upcoming changes as well after budget. I'm sure a lot of you have had a lot of questions from clients. So hoping that you can take a breather today, that you've got a cup of tea or coffee, you've got your notepad, and we're going to have a really awesome discussion today to give you some practical strategies and tips on that you can implement within your practice this coming end of financial year. So once again, thanks for coming along. I want you all to jump into chat, and this is how I'm going to know if you're looking at your emails or actually listening to this webinar. Jump into the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear where you guys are listening in from today. Hopefully you all know how to use Zoom at the moment. Brendan's tuning in from Auckland. Thanks, Louise. I love that music as well. Kate's from Brisbane, Adelaide, Rocky, Perth, everyone from Darwin, Brisbane, Vegas. Brilliant. So great to see. I love Marlborough in New Zealand. Oh, Karen, I think I might have to take a trip and sample some of the wines from there. This is brilliant. Well, keep the chat engagement going, guys. We'd love to hear your questions and hear your insights throughout this webinar. We'd love to keep this as engaging as possible. So for those of you who haven't used Zoom or maybe have been living under a rock for the last year or two, this session will be recorded. You'll definitely get the recording and the slide deck sent to you after the session. Please select the Everyone drop down, as most of you have been doing, and let us know where you're tuning in from. Use the Q&A button in Zoom if you can to ask any questions. We have an all-star panelist here today, set of panelists here today. So please make use of that Q&A panel and take advantage of the time that we've got together today, which should be about the next 45 minutes, and we'll make sure we get to answer all of your questions. For those of you who I haven't been able to meet before or haven't connected with on a webinar, I work for Ignition. So we're really excited to be hosting this webinar today. And I've worked in the accounting sort of tech space for about the last 8 years, and I'm really passionate about how accountants and bookkeepers can use technology to create efficiencies and create capacity in their practice. For those of you who don't know of Ignition, we are the world's first client engagement and commerce platform for professional services. We've been around for about 8 or 9 years now and work with over 5,000 practices globally in helping them sort of reinvent their client relationships, which is exciting. But enough from me. We're really excited to be hosting this webinar with our good friends at ADA. This is part of our series that we're running with Zero User Magazine, and we run one webinar a month with some really exciting partners, ADA being one of them this month. And so I'm super looking forward to the conversation today and excited to introduce Brendan Roberts, who's the CEO and co-founder of ADA. Brendan, over to you. I'd love to get a bit of background on yourself and why you're here with us today.
Thanks, Ethan. Really good to be here. Hi, everybody. Real privilege to be here today. Thank you for your time. I'm CEO and founder of ADA, as Ethan said. We're an early stage business. We've recently launched our new advisory platform specifically for accountants and bookkeepers, and our vision is to help you as accountants and bookkeepers move up into the advisory space and do that really, really efficiently. So we want to help you be proactive advisors for these small businesses. We think advisory can be done at scale, but not all the right tools are there to do that. So that's what we were there to try and help sort out for you. So there's a bit of compliance automation from our perspective. We want to help you improve your engagement with your clients, and then additionally, ultimately offer additional revenue services for your clients. So be able to charge for these advisory services. So we've got an exciting product. It's new. Come and check us out. We're still very much in early access. And so it's a real privilege to be here today because we've learned a lot from our accountant and bookkeeping partners that helped us co-create this. We've been working a lot with accountants and bookkeepers over the last year to get the product to where it is today, even though it is still early. And so for me, this is just a fantastic opportunity to keep working with accountants and bookkeepers and hearing things and sharing some of the insights and lessons that we've learned. And so I'm really excited to hear from Tracy and from Stuart and from Phil, who's our product manager as well. So I'll just be playing, I'll be popping in and out of the webinar, but just wanted to say thank you again, Ethan, for the opportunity.
Thanks, Brendan. Great to have you here. So without further ado, going to introduce our all-star panel today. So Tracy Rubens from Appy Books, Stuart Brandman from 542 Partners, and Phil Dominic, who is a CA and a product manager, I believe I've got that correct, at Ada. So really excited to have the three of you with us today. Again, thank you for your time and for being open to share your insights with the industry, and really hoping for a great discussion. Tracy, I think this is one of the, I don't know if you've done a webinar with Ignition before, but I may be incorrect there, but I'd love to get a bit of background on yourself and your business and what you're passionate about and why you're here today. I think you might be muted. It's not a Zoom meeting without
I'll start again. I'm very excited. So excited I didn't even unmute myself. Yeah, this is my first webinar with Ignition, but yeah, I'm really glad to be here. So my business is Appy Books. We're based in Brisbane. I have a long background in management, accounting and business analysis, and about 8 years ago, 2014, I was working for a really large Australian corporate, was made redundant and thought, I'm feeling really burnt out with this corporate stuff. I want to do something different. I want to make a difference. I want to use my superpowers for good, not evil. I want to create something of my own. So the first thing I did was Google what's new in accounting software. Xero popped up and that was it. That was me. I found what I was going to do. So since then, we've grown year on year. We've now got about 40 lovely clients that we handhold, and we don't have a vertical market, but what we focus on is trying to use apps to help us automate and make better processes within both our clients and within our practice. So that's kind of the business of us.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Tracy. And for those of you who know Brisbane, Tracy's in the cool gin bar kind of hipster part of the city, which is great. It's one of my favourite places to visit. So Stuart, you've, on the other hand, have done many webinars with Ignition. So welcome back. It's great to have you here. For those of you who haven't heard from you before, I'd love to hear a bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. Stuart Brandman from 542 Partners. I clearly don't look like that photo anymore. I think that must have been from one of the early webinars we did. I've certainly aged, but very nice to be here and to join everyone on the webinar. A bit of background, I'm one of three directors at 542 Partners. Our firm is 9 years young. The three directors came out of sort of ex-mid-tier accounting on the back of the adoption of cloud accounting, and we've been, a practice that has been really driven by adopting technology, automation, early adopters of new software. So that's why we're really excited to be on board and speaking about products like Ada. But certainly moving into the advisory space has been a challenge for us. So I'm really keen to share my thoughts and our experiences on that, and also to hear from the other panelists as well.
Brilliant. No, it's great to have you, Stuart. And Phil, first webinar with Ignition as well. Welcome to you, mate. And love to hear a bit of background on yourself. I don't know if you're also based in New Zealand, but yeah, great to hear from you.
Thanks, Ethan, and thanks so much for having me, Ignition. This was awesome. Yeah, I'm based in the North Shore. I'm the product manager for Ada. I'm also an accountant. Spent a few years in the Big Four doing auditing and business advisory, and then went into a smaller firm doing kind of more process automation. And just when technology was kind of booming, I got a shoebox on my desk of sort of receipts and thought, this is it. I'm starting my own thing. There's an easy way to do this. And then since then, 8 years ago, I've been running a small practice with my partner, and also been using technology and kind of having product manager roles to try and, I guess, solve problems around small business data. And also just, in the last 4 years around kind of advisory problems. So how can we, make accountants more efficient? How can we, spend our time on the best way possible and prioritize our client needs without having to jump into a Xero file and whatnot? So yeah, looking forward to hearing what the guys have to say. And yeah, just thanks for inviting me to be here. It's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. And yep, all three speakers moved from corporate to startup to use their powers for good and not evil, as Tracy said, which is awesome. So in terms of the key topics we're chatting about today, we'll talk a little bit about end of financial year and why we think now is the right time to think about offering new services to your clients. We do want to go one step down from this sort of advisory term. It is quite a broad term that's been used for many years within our industry, and we really want to get granular on what exactly can that look like for an accounting or bookkeeping practice. How do you build out this as a profitable service line within your business? How do you offer these new services to your clients while managing capacity so that it's not all bottlenecking at the partner or director? And we'll talk a little bit about how to structure those services so that you can manage your goal of advisory and working closely with your clients, and also accommodate all of the tasks that go along with end of financial year. So I might throw it to yourself first, Stuart, and just get you to talk a little bit to the opportunity that you've seen, and perhaps without saying the C word, over the last 18 months, there's obviously been a lot of changes to the way that we relate with our clients and engage with our clients. And as a result of that, accountants are super busy. So why is now the time to start thinking about offering new services, and where do you see the opportunity there within your clients and for the other advisors that are out there?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Ethan. And it's also, very poignant on the back of what's been an incredibly challenging 2 years for business and for the profession of accounting and bookkeepers as a whole. I can only speak for myself, but I know a lot of accountants and bookkeepers have gone above and beyond in the last 2 years, probably more so than they've ever done in their career, to really help get their clients and their clients' families across the line in terms of whether that's assisting with stimulus or cash flow forecasts or dealing with employment circumstances, as a whole range of issues that got thrust upon us, which felt like at a moment's notice, right? We'd kind of turned up our lives and put this, I guess, tremendous amount of workload and stress on the profession, which I think as a whole, the profession responded to really well. But I think what it highlighted is just how, firstly, trusted, advisors are in terms of accountants and bookkeepers. I know that quite often my phone was ringing, 12 to 13 hours a day for those first few weeks, because the accountant, I was kind of the most trusted person in their circle. So, whether it was a shoulder to lean on or someone to talk to, and then to get into the nitty-gritty of the business, the advisors are there to, no surprise, provide advice. And we were finding our way through it as well. And I think that the important thing that I've taken out of the last 2 years is that we are trusted, and we provide a tremendous amount of advice, and a lot of advice that we probably aren't remunerated for, but that we can probably learn from and take forward in terms of an ongoing service offering. I know in my experience, I've used that time to create further conversations with my clients, building upon what we've worked on over the last 12 to 24 months, whether that's cash flow modeling or structuring or more comprehensive advice, and building that into more of an ongoing service. The benefit of having these conversations in such a stressful time is that clients then realize and appreciate the value of having a regular and routine conversation about their business, maybe not so much about their compliance, but maybe about their growth or their strategy, their structure, and turning that into a routine and fixed service offering, whether that's weekly, fortnightly, monthly, quarterly. It sort of spoke to me as that this is a service that's really in demand and something that clients actually want, but probably hadn't had a chance to experience to any great extent without the impacts of COVID. So end of financial year is probably naturally a really good time to talk about this stuff. First and foremost, you might be going through an engagement or re-engagement process yourself. We're doing that in our business. Thankfully, Ignition makes that a lot easier for us, but it's certainly an opportunity for us to check in with our clients around the services we're offering, whether the services are commensurate to what their needs are, and whether it's time now to implement something a little bit more enhanced for their business needs above and beyond, say, a compliance engagement. And so there's a whole bunch of different ways that this can be put together, and we'll obviously talk about that in more detail. But I just think that's how we've got to where we are right now. End of financial year this year, particularly for us, is that we've got a bit of breathing space. We've got an opportunity to talk about where the clients have come from, where they want to go to, and how our services can match that as part of a re-engagement process on the 1st of July.
That's awesome, Stuart. And there's a lot of schools of thought around all of the advice that was provided through the COVID times, right? Like, do we charge for these services? Do we offer them for free? How do we go about doing this? Do we just help our clients? And I think there is an opportunity now. So Tracy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question and what you've seen with your clients. And then maybe just to go one step further and ask you, has there been a change to the kinds of services that you're offering your clients over the last 18 months? Have you been able to actually package up those advisory related services and create a profitable service line for your business?
Yeah, so I agree with Stuart that the last 2 years have been really tough for everyone, and that we were asked to do a lot of stuff that we perhaps hadn't done before. But to me, that's kind of an advantage, because perhaps in the past, the clients were not that keen to pay for advisory, whereas now they can really see the benefit, whether it's from your bookkeeper, on a more regular basis, or from your accountants on a, more regular basis as well. So they have seen the light, if you like, and said, wow, this is really making a difference when things are really tough. What can it do when things aren't so tough? And again, for end of financial year, even though we're really, really busy, if we start planning now, then it's not such a drain on our resources, after it rolls over to July. And I agree also with Stuart that end of financial years, when we're all talking to our clients, we're all engaging with them even more than usual. And that's a great time to start talking about new services. The new year is kind of like, spring. You wake up and everything's beautiful. The mistakes have gone. You can recreate the world. And that's when you strike and ask them what else they need. So that's the kind of idea of it. If they're already looking to you to say, what can you do for me that's more than in the past? Then that's the time to start packaging things up. And for bookkeepers, possibly it's not the same for bookkeepers as for accountants. They're much more into cash flow forecasting and maybe estate planning or exit planning and that kind of thing. Whereas we're looking at the dials and levers on a week-to-week basis of what we can tweak to help them to make a better bottom line or improve their gross profit margin, or those kinds of really simple things, small tweaks that they can make now that will make a difference later on. So the way that I've been doing it is a lot of managing by exception, so using things like ADA or other kind of reporting things that we use, and finding which client needs the most love now, and then working from, back from that. So when you're really busy, find the ones that are in the most stress that you work with first, and then go from there. And the way that we've packaged it up is I use Ignition. And when I do the packages, you use the new proposal editor with the 3 different packages. You have compliance as one, you have compliance reporting in another, and you have compliance reporting and a little bit of advisory, and give them the stuff that they need. Make it like a lolly shop of pick and mix. And you would be amazed how many times that the client actually chooses the options with more things for them that they think, oh yeah, I actually do need that. If you talk to them about it, it's all about communication, really. So yeah.
That's awesome, Tracy. And it leads really well into the next question, which I've got for Phil, actually, just around how do we start to introduce these new services and deliver them in a way that's scalable? And I loved your point there, Tracy, on managing by exception. How do you actually prioritize the clients that are going to A, value, B, pay for these services? And Phil, you guys are building a platform that allows advisors to be able to do this very thing. I'd love to hear your insight from perhaps some of the high-performing practices you're working with and how they've gone about this whole prioritization piece and actually delivering these services in a way that works for them and doesn't bottleneck and cause capacity issues in the practice.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, so I guess what we've seen from some of the awesome accountants like Tracy and Stuart that we've been working with is that technology has kind of unearthed the data, so they can they're no longer kind of getting to year end and that sort of thing and seeing what's gone on in that zero file. They can kind of see at a glance where things are at. I think just with that that live data kind of coming through, it means that accountants can prioritize which clients need help. They can also see which ones might be lagging that may need a bookkeeper, for example, because their data's, super old. So I think prioritizing those kind of, I guess client needs and then using technology to, roll out those services. How can you, especially with the impacts of COVID, how can you change that engagement with your customers? Do they no longer want a PDF report and a client meeting because they don't have time and they're waiting for stock to arrive? If they're a builder, it's the hardest thing in the world for them right now to get any time. So essentially just using that technology where you can pull the data out and roll it out to your customers in a scalable way. I feel like the practices that are using technology like Tracy and Stuart, they're so far ahead in terms of their proactively looking after their customers. So we've found that just that use of technology. Sorry, that's my husky. She always comes in when I'm having a meeting. But yeah, just the use of technology has just been a huge gain for advisors, especially to unearth the data that's available to them.
That's awesome, Phil. And Brendan, anything to add there from your perspective? I think specifically just around this like client identification piece, right? Like how do we actually pick out the clients that will value these services?
Yeah, I think the phrase that Tracy used was really interesting around the management by exception. So yeah, unlocking that data and really identifying here's who you need to speak to today and why, and using data to do that rather than manual processes to do that. And that's really can help you focus. You know, I don't need to talk to everybody else at the moment, but today these 5 clients need my help. And then switching into proactive mode is what we're seeing. There's a lot of demand for that coming from the industry, from accountants and bookkeepers. How do I be proactive? I've made this promise, and now how do I do this? And kind of going through that transition of being reactive into proactive. But I probably wanted to touch on one of the previous points that both Tracy and Stuart mentioned in the previous question you asked them, Ethan, in the context of I'm too busy. Both of you mentioned that you have a lot more regular engagement with your clients. So how does that work? How do you have more regular engagement with your clients, which I think is great, and it's probably what your clients want. But how do you do that when you're also really busy?
I'm just really organized. You just divide your time up into little parcels and you work out what you've got to do in the week. You would be amazed when you look at my Trello screen of all the things that I have planned for the week and tick them off. So yeah, that's all. You just make time. You know, you've got the amount of clients, even if it's just a phone call, it doesn't have to be going to see them or them coming to see you. Just talk. Yeah, it's all about, most of my job is about communication, which is, I suppose, why I like it.
And just to add to it, I think accountants and bookkeepers by their nature like a bit of regimented and regime about their day-to-day. I think the good thing about having a fixed scheduled meeting, whether I said weekly, fortnightly, monthly, it keeps everyone accountable, right? There's a time in the calendar that everyone needs to work to. Always make sure there's an agenda. I never have a meeting without an agenda because we're going into this meeting to talk about a specific set of items. Keeps us on track. We follow up. We check those items off ahead of the next meeting. And I think that's kind of the most important thing is if things are planned, they're in the calendar, they're scheduled as part of the workflow, you can work around that. I think what makes it really difficult is where advice comes out of nowhere. And we might talk about that a little bit later on, because that's where it's much harder to build scalability and build in the capacity within organizations to deal with advice that is not scheduled and routine, like I mentioned.
That leads on perfectly to the next question, Stuart. It's almost like you saw the deck before we had this discussion. But I mean, pricing and packaging these services and thinking about advisory, I'd love to just go one level deeper with you on that. So Tracy mentioned that she uses or gives the clients the ability to choose the level of service that they want to, engage you for. How have you guys approached that at 542? And the classic thing is, yeah, it's great. The sort of advisory stuff's awesome, but my client's not going to pay for it, or they don't really see the value in it, or they're never going to look at the reports, which is, I guess the problem that AID is trying to solve. But how do you guys manage that whole pricing and packaging piece? And then how do you, breaking the advisory topic down, what services do you offer as part of your advisory package?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And look, the first thing I'll say right up front is we don't do this well. We don't do this perfectly by any stretch. And I would hasten to guess that a lot of business owners and accountants and bookkeepers would be in the same position if they're honest. It's a very challenging concept to price and to deliver and to work out, well, what is an advisory service and how is that tailored and what does it look like and in what format is it delivered? I think that's why there's so many conversations around this topic, because it's a very, very challenging piece of infrastructure to implement in a business. It's typically having to be delivered by high level staff, albeit that I think the level of automation and technology that's coming into the market now is certainly changing that space. So I think the lessons that we learn, and if I could maybe just tell a few war stories, because we've certainly made a few, I guess, missteps along the way, is I think it's really important that you provide an element of the service out of goodwill or out as a gesture of sort of a lead-in, rather than to say to someone, well, here's an advisory service, you should take this up because of X. Because without that level of lead in or intro time or really diagnosing the problem, you haven't really got the why for the client. You know, you could say as much as you want how good it will be or how good the report will be. You've got to really understand and work through what the specific client's problems are that you're going to address. So typically, and as again, going back to where we started this, COVID was a really good initiator for this, because typically, if we start by addressing a particular challenge or set of challenges within a business and we work through those in an advisory setting, it then leads to the next conversation, the conversation that spurs on after that, which then rolls naturally into a let's keep talking. And all of a sudden it becomes a routine service. One of the things that we did, and I think it was a misstep, was to try and make advisory about the reporting or about the software, when really the software should aid and assist the advice that's been given. But advice always needs to have some level of tailorability to it, and it needs to be suited to the client's needs. So that's where I think we've learned that we need to offer a bit of the service to the client. We need to solve a problem or show how we can solve problems within a business. And then that should lead to an ongoing, as I said, recurring or scheduled engagement with software, really helping to support and automate as much of that step as we can.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And we're going to lead into the question to follow on from that is how do you reset client expectations when you've been providing a level of advice and not necessarily charging for it? But before we do that, Tracy, I'd love to just get your thoughts on the difference between, you know, how an accountant would potentially offer an advisory service versus what a bookkeeper would offer, and what are the kinds of services that you've been packaging up and presenting as part of that compliance reporting package that you referred to earlier?
Yeah. Definitely the services are different. And I think possibly all practices have this problem, but I think small practices with small businesses perhaps suffer from this even more so, because the clients are little. They don't want to pay for anything they don't want to, or, you know, that they can't afford to pay for other things. So trying to find that level of what the advisory, you know, they need extra help, but trying to find that level and packaging it up is the challenge. Using products to actually, as Stuart said, you don't want to have your experienced people doing all the work. Firstly, they're really busy, and secondly, it's not cost effective for the client or for the business. So trying to find that support of software, and then perhaps be able to, going back to managing by exception, have more junior staff looking for the highlights. And then if the conversation needs to be had, it can be had with, excuse me, with the more senior partners. The kind of packages or the kind of things that I do for our clients, I do a lot of weekly, just simple cash reports, like not a big report. It's just a tiny little thing, just showing where they are, where they were, what they've spent this week, and then mapping that over time so they can see where they were compared to this year to last year, purely in Excel, dump it out of zero. And I've got one standard template that I use for all of our clients. It doesn't take long to do. And that is the kind of thing that then I build in for the reporting. So if we're just doing compliance, they wouldn't be receiving that. So it's not just printing out a report and giving it to someone. It's then saying, oh, I give them a little blurb, oh, you know, your cash is up this week, or whatever it is, but breaking it down into small things. Again, for lots of our clients are quite small. So you need to make it simple. So then they become more engaged and they become more interested, and then they become more interested in more advisory. If there's anything bigger, I usually pass them to their accountants. I have a really good relationship with the accountants we work with. So we would suggest, oh, if you want to expand, if you want to do whatever, then speak to the accountants, and they would already be more knowledgeable about what's going on in their business. So be able to tackle that advisory piece with the accountants. Does that answer your question?
That's great. That's brilliant. No, that's fantastic. And look, I think we can sort of move this into this whole question around capacity, right? So how does this play into the day-to-day life and the day-to-day workflows of what we're doing? None of the firms we speak to can find staff at the moment, and I don't think we can solve these problems by necessarily finding staff that are capable of offering advisory services, you know, without putting in place these sort of new processes to actually support it, because one, that they're really expensive and they just don't exist at the moment. So from what we're hearing, so you know, open this up to any of you. Perhaps Stuart, if we want to start with you guys, how have you guys managed this whole question around capacity? You know, have you grown that from within your firm? Has it purely just been an implementation of processes and tech to support it? Have you somehow managed to find staff? Are you paying them really well? Like what's your secret? How have you tackled this within your practice?
D, all of the above. I'll echo the sentiments that everyone's saying at the moment. It is really difficult to find staff. Thankfully, I think, again, COVID's been a really good reason for looking for remote staff. So we've thankfully turned to staff that we've worked with previously that have sort of relocated due to family reasons or whatever it might be. And we're employing people full-time that work remotely, which is great. We have the technology and the ability to do that now, which helps us continue to grow our business and grow our staff. Without that in this market, it'd be very difficult to do so. I think that the main driver of capacity in our ability to generate advisory services is, and I hasten to say, it is automation. We've been on a consistent and a never-ending journey to automate as much as we can within our practice. Obviously, like most businesses, it started with the compliance set of automations, and we worked really hard in our first 3 to 5 years to automate as much as the compliance side as we could, so that we could open up the capacity to deliver the advice services that we could see were coming. And then from there, it's been about learning and also automating the advisory services. So whilst I said that advice has to be tailored and suited, and it can't just be a print and replicate, there is elements to advisory that can certainly be automated, and technology can assist with the advisory process, whether that's a pre-prepared report pack for the meeting, whether it's automating tools around the structures of those meetings, scheduling of Zoom meetings, creating agendas. There's a whole bunch of tools that can be used that automate the advice process. That means that the level to which you're reliant on I guess the higher level, maybe director or partner level led services is smaller. Ideally, I will, for example, in our service suite, have most of the pre-preparation work for our monthly meetings, let's say, drafted for me by lower level staff, using automation, using pre-prepared templates, and using some other tools in our practice, so that we can come into this meeting where, whether it's me or one of the other directors are leading the meeting, we're just really focusing on high level advice-based content, which might be fluent, which might change, which can't be pre-prepared in a report pack or a set of bullet points, but that's where the value is for the client, but we're able to deliver that in a scalable fashion. So I think if I break it down, it's about getting that balance right between the clients want to speak to people that understand their business, that tailor their solutions to that business, but from a practitioner's perspective, we need to be able to deliver that in the most efficient way we possibly can, and to dedicate the resources at the right level for the right process.
That's awesome. And this leads really well, and just conscious of time, we'll have to motor through some of these questions, but it leads well into this next question, which I might throw to you, Phil, if that's okay. You know, this whole notion around turning those once-off engagements, and what you're saying, Stuart, is, you know, I would say that most people on this call will be having those kind of discussions with clients once a year, or maybe a couple of times a year. But, you know, how have you guys gone about solving that problem of turning those once-off conversations or those infrequent conversations into that ongoing, more frequent form of advice? Is that something obviously you're tackling this at Ada, but any of your experience in practice or anything that you've seen from your practices you're working with would be great.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just touch on what Stuart and Tracy said, just around how each and every client's different, and it does require that tailored, you know, bit of service. So it's kind of, you know, depending on which clients, you know, that can kind of pay for that, which ones have actually paid their accounting bill. You know, those are the ones that you want to have more regular conversations with. And then also which clients, you know, should you be dropping because they're costing you money, essentially, you know, and are you finding that out? You know, are you working with the right clients and the right process and whatnot? But yeah, I guess, you know, coming back to technology, being able to automate that, you know, compliance service, as well as automate that advisory service. So how can you give your customers, you know, the content they want? You know, I work with a Sparky who just says to me, just give me a cash flow tool, you know, that's got my P&L as well as drawings included. So I know, you know, where I will be at the start of the month to where I am at the end of the month. And that's all he wants. He doesn't want the, you know, the profitability stuff, but he said, if you give that to me, then, you know, I'll be, you know, willing to pay you what it's worth, sort of thing. So they're, you know, they see the, you know, they see the value in it. They just kind of, you know, from the regular monthly kind of conversations or even yearly conversations, you know, without having that data and, you know, in a simple and understandable way, then they're not really going to engage with it. So I think that's super important, is using technology to translate that, you know, complex financial accounting language and a profit and loss into simple, you know, business insights that a small business owner can actually engage in and set goals with, you know, something that they sort of understand. But yeah, I think also as well that kind of leading data piece as well, advisors are really keen to kind of get their hands on that leading indicator data, what else is driving sales and whatnot. So I feel like, again, technology brings that to the pile, and gives advisors another, tool in their toolkit, because it gives them that specialist knowledge that, they need to provide to the customer.
Mm.
Ethan, just a quick
Brendan.
one on this. What we've also seen is quite a few accounting and bookkeeping companies, when we've been exploring this exact point with them, I want to work with better clients, is the concept of the client service level agreement, or an SLA. They wanted to impose those on the clients. The clients do what they need to do in order to unblock you as the accountant or bookkeeper to do what you need to do. And so we're hearing this more and more, and it's quite an interesting concept that I think we want to dig into deeper and deeper at some other point. But yeah, the concept of a service level agreement with your clients, which I guess obviously something that you do as well with Ignition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that you can solve within an engagement letter, but also getting them agreed to the specific, the level of the quality of data, or the, sending the documents on time. That really basic stuff is something we haven't solved for either, to be transparent. I think it's an issue for everyone. Tracy, you were going to add something.
Sorry. Yeah, I would go back even one step further than Brendan. So yeah, you've got these clients and you have a service level agreement and you let them know what they need, but you've got to choose the right clients in the first place. There's got to be a little bit of science to that too. And I actually used to have some stinkers when I started. You'd take on every client you could possibly get. And then you get older and wiser and you start being more selective. And I've got now a checklist, and mostly it's based on personality traits. So when I meet my new client, I run them through this little checklist in my head of, are they meeting the API standard? And then since I've had this Tracy science to work out the checklist, we haven't had any stinkers. So I think that, using that kind of, because otherwise you're wasting your time as well. So if you're more engaged in the type of clients that you actually take on, then that helps to make them sticky, and that helps that they're going to do what you want them to do as well, and makes your life easier.
That's brilliant. Maybe you could share the Tracy science with everyone after this webinar. So Stuart, your practice has been around for a little bit longer, and so this question might be a little bit more relevant to yourself, but how do you sort of reset client expectations where you haven't previously charged for these kind of services, and you might have been offering a level of advice, but now want to, we're starting again for the new financial year, we're actually going to start charging for these services we've been doing on an ad hoc basis. And you mentioned there that you were getting calls 12 or 13 hours a day. How have you gone about sitting down with your longer term clients to say, hey, we're now going to start charging you for this, and this is why? And I'm sure this is a problem that a lot of people are facing at the moment, particularly those with larger or more established firms.
Yeah, to be honest, it's both a difficult conversation, but also a simple conversation in the end. I think accountants and bookkeepers can overcomplicate the pending conversations with what actually is the aftermath of that conversation. I think, how it's generally been phrased, and especially again over the last couple of years, is, I've gone above and beyond to try and help you during this difficult period. And as you know, we were never engaged to do X, Y, and Z, but we're now doing this. I believe that you see value in this and you still want to continue. But as part of our re-engagement process, we're going to have to obviously put in place a monthly fee. I'm happy to leave in the past what has happened and the assistance we've given you to date. I think generally my experience with those conversations are that the clients are grateful, and yes, they do value the service, having experienced it, and are willing to pay for it. It's very rare that the client turns around and says, well, no, I wasn't expecting to pay for this. And again, maybe that goes back to Tracy's point. If you have those situations, maybe that's not the right client for your business, or where you want to take either your practice or your relationship with that client. So I think the other, outside of sort of, maybe triggers from assistance with COVID, it's about identifying as early as possible instances where scope creep occurs. In my experience, where I've probably made mistakes is letting a journey go too far down the path to then try and say, hey, by the way, this is out of scope. As soon as you see some trigger points, it might be, a business sale or a restructure or some kind of other event. It's about saying, okay, look, this is outside of the scope. I'm not sure where this heads. It might be really simple. It might be, a 6 to 12 month project. Let's just get something in place now, either an estimate or a by the hour rate, just to acknowledge that this is something that is beyond what we were traditionally engaged for. And then you can always check in with them about how that engagement is tracking, how much time they've used up, or how far this has gone along the estimated scope.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I'd love to stay on this point around scope creep as well, because it's an issue that we see all the time with accountants specifically, and bookkeepers, obviously. But I guess the point that I wanted to make is that we see scope creep occur when the client's expectations are not properly set. And I think this comes back to what you're saying, Tracy, just around making sure that you bring on the right clients, but you're communicating. And Brendan, you mentioned this as well, communicating what their expectations are and what we expect them to do to hold up their end of the bargain and the relationship. And I wanted to touch on the last point here. Actually, one thing that we have seen as sort of a differentiator is that writing off a ton of work actually leads to disengaged staff. We've seen it happen in these bigger practices. We've seen a huge amount of people leaving mid-tier firms to start their own thing, because exactly what you were saying, Phil, you don't want a box of receipts dumped on your desk and have to trawl through it. So I'd love to just open this up to anyone who wants to jump in. Is this something you've seen in your practice? Is there any further insight you can lend from your experience in the kind of scope creep thing, but also how this impacts your staff engagement?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I guess with what I've seen, one of the biggest problems that advisors kept on telling us was that reconciliation process, getting to the end of the GST period, knowing that there's hundreds of transactions for these customers, and then there's a mad rush to get it. You're writing off work, that sort of thing. So every accountant was saying, if you could solve this problem, this would be the one to solve. If you could automate that kind of bookkeeping process, or at least proactively alert me to which clients aren't doing their job, so you can then take over that service. So I feel like that, the data, unearthing the data, which clients need to do so many transactions, ahead of time, so you're not kind of getting to that mad rush at the end of the period and having to do, work that you hadn't necessarily agreed to. So I feel like that data problem's a huge one. Just that, proactively alerting the advisors to what the client needs to do really helps.
Brilliant. Anyone else want to jump in there before we?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple other things, Ethan. I think there's obviously, I guess, a couple of distinct circumstances here. One is when potentially you take on a new client and the data isn't clean, or they're getting new to your processes and how you do your work, and I guess what your expectations as their advisor back to them are. So there's an educational piece that sometimes needs to go on to transition that client from maybe behaviours they had previously to behaviours you would expect now they're on board with yourself as the advisor. I think in our business, we talk a lot about sort of the swings and roundabouts, the unders and overs, and from time to time, you will get situations where clients, I guess, get on the wrong side of that ledger, but it's about identifying, well, what are the causes for that and can they be rectified? If they can be rectified, great, you'll pick that up again in the swings and roundabouts. If it can't be, that's when you need to use a couple of your tools at your disposal. One is potentially your re-engagement process. So an opportunity to say, look, over the last 12 months, we've noticed X, Y, and Z is happening. Going forward, our new engagement price is going to factor in whatever the issues are as part of your pricing set. So you can either reprice to capture that lost time or resources, or it might be an opportunity for that client to move on if it's not the right outcome. There's other tools you can use in terms of direct intervention, whether it's maybe referring them to a bookkeeper or some other kind of advisor that might be able to solve the specific problem they've got. But generally, it's just a communication thing. If you're working with a client, explain the problem, you can generally resolve those issues one way or another.
Awesome. That's brilliant. Just one thing to add, we're coming to the end of the webinar, but don't forget to ask any questions if you've got questions of the panel today, and we're happy to answer those. Just reflecting, solving this issue of scope creep in your practice has several benefits from what we've seen with the high-performing firms we're working with. Largely, it allows you to take control of your time, actually get paid for the value, whether it's reinvesting in your business, taking time off to spend with your kids, taking a holiday, working with fewer but better clients. If you're a smaller practice, paying your staff what they're worth so you can retain them. All these sort of things are a byproduct of actually solving this issue around scope creep. There's a good question come through from Brendan here. What percentage of your current clients have issues with scope creep? Data not clean, info not set on time, circumstances changing? That for Tracy or Stuart on this one.
I would say it's up and down, depends on the time of the month, time of the year, whatever. But I'm pretty strict. I'm very kind, but I'm pretty strict. So I badger them. I'm like the squeaky door. I just constantly am saying, hi, how are you? Have you got this for me? So it's really annoying. Prior to my last job, I worked in an IT consulting company, and I had 35 consultants that I had to chase every week for timesheets and whatever. So I got really good at chasing people for information, but I would say possibly 10% at any one stage might be a little bit over. But I try not to, like Brendan said, I try not to sweat the little stuff. If it's only a small up, and next month it'll be down, you just let it slide. It's only if you have someone who's constantly going to be creeping, then it's a problem. But the other thing that we do as well is in our engagement, we also have a line that says out of scope. So if we collect up all of our hours of out of scope, we already have the opportunity to charge for it if we want to. So it's already built into our proposal.
That's great, Tracy. And Stuart and Andrew have said 25% of their clients, they estimate, would have those sort of issues. So
I think one thing I'll just add, Ethan, is there's a difference between scope creep and write-offs in the sense of you might do something that's out of your scope, but you're not necessarily writing off on it. Now, we're a firm that doesn't do timesheets. That's even more problematic for us. But I think it comes down to, is the scope creep something that is going to result in some other benefit down the track as well? Like, you might go above and beyond, and as I said, I'll use COVID as an example. You might go above and beyond in a particular set of circumstances for a client. It might be they're starting out or they've gone through a challenging. You rectify that, yes, you incur some scope creep, but you might win that client for the next 10 years at really profitable margin. So scope creep can be one of these things that can be viewed in a few different ways. There's no right or wrong answer, but I think I'll just point out that scope creep necessarily is not a bad thing. It's actually an opportunity.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Fantastic. Well, we might just move through to the close of the webinar now. So just a quick reminder to ask your questions if you do have any of the panel, because we will be wrapping up soon and you'll miss your chance. So jump into the chat or the Q&A. Before we do that, we help a lot of practices sort of manage this issue around scope creep by allowing them to include these sort of terms in their engagement. That's the whole premise around why Ignition was built, so that you can include all of these provisions and present it to your clients in a really succinct and professional looking way, and it allows them to digitally sign off and agree to these terms as well. So if you guys are interested in learning more about either how Ignition can help with these problems or how Ada can help you actually scale up these services within your practice, let me just try and having some issues here launching the poll. So maybe if you just want to pop it in the chat for now, and I'll try and launch the poll in a couple of minutes. But while I fix this up, Brendan, any closing comments from yourself from the discussion today?
What I would say, Ethan, it's quite interesting listening to this, is a lot of it is very similar to starting another kind of business, a software business or anything else. And it really starts with how do we solve the actual problem for the customer? Rather than offering what we've traditionally offered, because that's what accountants do or that's what bookkeepers do, and just following that model, is let's dig in and see what problems do my small business customers really need solving, and then starting there and working back from that. And I think that's quite an interesting, or might be a different approach to figuring out how you want to package up your services and start to charge for them, because that's what small business customers will really value. And what's interesting is we did some research with a lot of small business customers, and we asked them a bunch of questions about what they valued and what would make a good and successful day and what would be a really good accountant or bookkeeper for them. And then we asked the accountant and bookkeepers, and the answers were quite different. So there is a mismatch of expectations from both sides. So I think that's probably another subject for another day. But if we can really solve those small business customer problems, we're onto the right thing together.
Brilliant. It's fantastic. I've just launched that poll there. So if you're interested in hearing more about how Ada can help you solve these problems, or about how Ignition can solve this issue of scope creep and engagements, or if you just like some more resources, we've actually got several white papers, ebooks, and resources we can send you on these topics that are written by accountants in practice as well, then please select that option and we can send them through to you. But lastly, I just wanted to say thank you firstly to the panel, Tracy, Stuart, Phil's Husky, and Brendan as well. Thank you for your contributions today. I think it's been a really valuable discussion, and I've certainly learned a lot. I've got a page of notes here myself, and I really appreciate you sharing openly and honestly of your experience for the industry. So thanks again, and thanks to everyone who's taken the time to actually join us on the webinar today. You will be receiving the recording, so feel free to rewatch it, and if you missed some of those gems, and share it with your team. But aside from that, we'll sign off for today and hope to see you at another webinar soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Good to see
Thanks,
you all.
everyone.
Ethan.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.